For decades, the old farmhouse on top of Raven Hill had stood abandoned. The townsfolk of Cold Creek whispered that it wasn't really empty. They said the house was hungry. When Daniel Carter bought the property, people shook their heads. Some said it was cursed. Others warned him to stay away. But Daniel, widowed, tired, and desperate for a new start, moved in with his 2 children, Emily, 17, and Jacob, 10. From the very first moment Emily laid eyes on the house, something inside her recoiled. The front door groaned like a wounded animal as it opened for the first time. A foul odor rushed out, damp, moldy, metallic, almost like rust or blood. Daniel forced a smile. Just need some fresh air, that's all. But when he tried to open the first window, the glass trembled violently, as if something inside was fighting to stay hidden. The first night, that night, as Emily lay in her new bedroom, she heard footsteps, slow, heavy, right above her ceiling. But the house had no attic. Her voice shook. "Dad, Jacob." Silence. Only the cold wind creeping through the cracks in the door. By morning, she opened her door and froze. Across the hallway floor were muddy footprints. They climbed up the stairs and stopped directly at Emily's bedroom door. The neighbor later, that afternoon, while they unpacked, a woman appeared at the gate. She just stood there, staring at the house, her face pale and unreadable. Daniel waved politely. "Hello? We're the Carters. Just moved in." The woman did not smile. Her voice was raspy, broken. "You shouldn't be here." Emily stepped forward. "Why not?" The woman's eyes darkened as they locked on the house. "Because it doesn't want you." And without another word, she turned and disappeared into the trees. The mirror on the second night, Emily dreamed. She was standing before the tall, cracked mirror in her room, but her reflection wasn't moving with her. Instead, it tilted its head slowly and smiled. Emily jolted awake, her heart racing. Her eyes darted to the corner of the room. The mirror was still there, silent, until it blinked. Emily screamed. Daniel and Jacob rushed in, finding her pointing at the mirror with trembling hands. But in its surface, they saw only Emily, pale, shaking, terrified. "Just a nightmare," Daniel whispered. But Emily knew the truth. The thing in the mirror had smiled at her, and it was still watching. Emily barely slept that night. The mirror in her room seemed to watch her from beneath the sheet she had thrown over it, its presence heavier than before. Every creak in the old house made her heart race. At midnight, a scream ripped through the silence. "Jacob!" Daniel rushed to his son's room. The boy was trembling, curled into a tight ball on the floor. "Jacob, what happened?" Daniel asked, kneeling beside him. They were whispering," Jacob choked out. From the walls, inside the walls. Daniel's face went pale. The walls of Ravenhill had secrets. But could they really whisper? Later, Emily crept down the hallway for a glass of water. The dim light stretched the shadows unnaturally, and then she heard it. A chorus of voices, faint, urgent, impossible to ignore. Words slithered into her mind, half understood, half felt, like icy fingers brushing her soul. Her breath caught. The whispers grew louder, circling her, and then, thud, the glass slipped from her hands and shattered. Emily spun around, nothing. But when she looked back, the shards had arranged themselves into a single word: leave. The next day, Emily explored the dusty basement. Among old trunks, she found a leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed and crumbling. "It watches me. At night. It stands by the mirror. It whispers through the walls. I cannot escape. Ravenhill will never let me go." Emily slammed it shut. Her hands shook. Behind her, a soft creak. Jacob was standing there, pale, his gaze distant. "They don't want you reading that," he whispered. That night, the house's whispers grew louder. Daniel claimed it was just old pipes, but Emily knew better. Pressing her ear to the wall, she could hear dozens of voices, moaning, crying, pleading. And then one voice she knew, unmistakable, her mother's. "Emily, help me." Frozen, Emily watched as the wallpaper in her room began to peel on its own. Beneath it, a door, hidden, unpainted, as if waiting for her. It was a door that shouldn't exist. Emily's hand hovered over the doorknob, the voices rising into a fevered crescendo. The house seemed to hold its breath with her. The whispers pleaded, warned, demanded, and she knew, with a cold certainty, that crossing that threshold would change everything. Emily's fingers trembled over the cold doorknob. The whispers inside the walls had become a fevered chorus, twisting words into demands she couldn't fully understand. She inhaled sharply. One step. The door swung open with a groan that echoed like a scream through the silent house. Inside was a narrow staircase, descending into darkness, the air thick and metallic. Her flashlight flickered. Shadows danced on the walls, human shapes, or the imagination of a terrified mind. "Emily," Jacob's voice trembled from behind her. Don't go down there." But she couldn't stop. Something beyond that door called to her. Something that promised answers and horrors. The stairs seemed endless. The whispers followed, coiling around her, tightening their grip on her thoughts. Words she didn't recognize slithered across her mind. Stay, run, join. At the bottom, she found a narrow hallway lined with mirrors. Not one, not two, but dozens. Each reflected her face, but warped, twisted, screaming silently back at her. One mirror showed her mother, eyes wide with terror. Emily. Her heart froze. She stumbled back. When she turned, the hallway behind her had vanished. The staircase was gone. Only the mirrors remained. Then a whisper she could understand. Clear. "You shouldn't be here." Emily froze. The voice was hers. Or rather, a version of her that hadn't existed yet. The reflection stepped forward, hand reaching out through the glass. Emily recoiled. The glass rippled, like water. Her reflection whispered again, "It's hungry. It's always hungry." A cold wind slammed through the hallway. The mirrors cracked, one by one, spiderwebbing with dark lines that seemed to bleed. The whispers became screams. Emily covered her ears. Suddenly, the floor beneath her gave way. She fell, tumbling into a room filled with objects, old toys, broken furniture, and bones. Hundreds of bones, scattered across the floor, some human, some unit. N-T-file dot. At the center of the room, a shadow crouched. It rose, revealing a figure in tattered robes, its face obscured, mouth moving without sound. The whispers condensed into one voice, hissing directly into Emily's mind. "You belong to Ravenhill." Emily screamed, scrambling backward. The figure advanced, slow, inevitable. The room seemed to stretch, growing taller, walls bending. Her flashlight slipped from her grasp, clattering into the darkness. A sudden crash of light, a mirror shattered behind her. For a brief moment, she saw her mother again, trapped in the glass, mouth screaming silently. "Emily, run!" The shadow recoiled, snarling. Emily seized the moment. She darted past the bones, through a narrow passage that appeared where none existed before. The hallway twisted, confusing her, but she felt the pull of the stairs above. She emerged back in her room, gasping for air. The hidden door was gone. The whispers faded, but not entirely. Something inside Ravenhill had noticed her intrusion, and it would not forget. Emily couldn't sleep. Every shadow in her room seemed to twitch, to breathe. The whispers had returned, quieter now, but sharper, like teeth scraping against her skull. Downstairs, the house was alive. The walls creaked, floors groaned, doors whispered open and slammed shut. Jacob refused to leave Emily's side, his eyes darting toward every dark corner. "We should call someone, the police, anyone," he whispered, voice shaking. This isn't normal." Emily shook her head. "They wouldn't believe us. They'd think we're crazy." The air grew colder. The smell of decay seeped from the vents, like something dead had been trapped inside the house for decades. Then it started. A door downstairs banged open. Footsteps echoed slow, deliberate. They weren't Jacob's, they weren't Emily's. Something was moving. Something wrong. Emily grabbed a flashlight and crept to the hallway. Shadows darted across the walls, forming grotesque shapes that seemed almost alive. The whispers weren't just inside her head anymore, they were outside, surrounding her, calling her name, Emily. She froze. The voice was everywhere. It came from the walls, the floorboards, the ceiling. Her pulse hammered in her ears. In the kitchen, objects began to shift on their own. A chair tipped over. A knife skittered across the floor. Plates cracked, sending shards flying. Emily ducked behind the counter, breath ragged. Jacob shouted from the other side of the house. "Emily, run!" She bolted, but the house had changed. The layout twisted, doors leading to rooms that hadn't existed moments ago. The walls bled shadows. The whispers became screams, screaming her name, promising pain, promising death. In the living room, the fireplace flared with black flames, casting monstrous silhouettes across the walls. The shadowy figure from the hidden room appeared again, taller now, moving faster, faceless but unmistakably aware of her. Emily screamed, but her voice was swallowed. The figure advanced, and the air itself seemed to thicken, weighing her down. Every heartbeat was a drumbeat of terror. She dove into a closet, pulling the door shut just as the figure passed. Through the slats, she watched as it prowled the room, whispering secrets only she could hear. "You cannot escape. You belong to Ravenhill." Suddenly, a cold hand touched her shoulder. Emily spun around, but the closet was empty. Or almost empty. The shadows inside the closet writhed, forming the faint outline of her mother's face. Eyes wide, silent scream, bloodless. Emily staggered back. "Mom!" she shouted. Silence. The house's voice boomed through every wall, every floorboard. "The hill hungers. The hill knows." Emily realized something terrifying. Ravenhill wasn't just a house. It was a predator. It was alive, and it had been watching her family for generations, learning, waiting. "We have to leave," Jacob said, grabbing her hand. No, they ran, but the house fought them. Stairs collapsed behind them. Hallways looped back on themselves. Every exit dissolved into shadow. The house hunted, and every second that passed made it hungrier. Emily's flashlight flickered. In the brief light, she saw dozens of faces in the walls, trapped, screaming silently, eyes pleading, and above all, the shadow of the figure, watching, waiting. There was no way out. Emily's hands shook as she clutched Jacob's arm. The hallway twisted like a nightmare, walls stretching and shrinking, swallowing light. Every step echoed, but the sound wasn't theirs. It was something else moving just behind them. "We have to find the attic," Emily gasped. It has to be the source." Jacob swallowed hard, but nodded. The attic? The place their grandmother had whispered about but never named. The place she had always warned them never to go. The staircase to the attic was warped, impossibly long, spiraling into darkness. With each step, Emily felt it. The presence inside the house wasn't just watching it, was feeding off their fear. The air thickened, smelling of rotting earth and burnt flesh. Halfway up, the whispers grew coherent. A chorus of voices, hundreds of them, all screaming at once, "Leave, or join us." The hill remembers. Emily froze. Faces appeared in the walls, dozens of pale, hollow-eyed souls. They pressed against the wallpaper, mouths opening in silent screams, fingers stretching through the cracks, reaching for her. Jacob grabbed her wrist. "Move. We can't stop now." The attic door loomed ahead, blackened and warped, as though the wood itself had rotted from centuries of malice. Emily pushed it open. Inside, the room pulsed, almost breathing. Shadows twisted, in impossible shapes. A large, cracked mirror dominated one wall. Emily's reflection stared back, but it wasn't her. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow, and behind her in the mirror, the figure loomed, faceless, hands stretching toward her. "You cannot hide," it whispered. Then the floor groaned. Something moved beneath them, a living thing burrowing, digging, through the house itself. Jacob screamed as a hand, skeletal and dripping, shot up through the floorboards, grasping at his leg. Emily yanked him free, blood spraying. But neither looked back. The attic had a single chest in the center, ancient and locked with a rusted padlock. Emily felt it call to her. Trembling, she pried it open. Inside, a collection of journals, yellowed with age. Her grandmother's handwriting scrawled across the pages, frantic, terrified. "Ravenhill is alive. It feeds on blood, fear, despair. It remembers the sins of all who dwell here. You cannot leave until it is satisfied." Emily read further, stomach twisting. The hill had been a trap for generations. Her family, her ancestors, had been lured here, one by one, consumed. A cold wind blew through the attic, extinguishing their flashlight. Emily felt a whisper brush her ear. "You are next." Jacob pulled her toward the chest. One journal had a map, secret passages, hidden rooms, a way to escape. But it came with a warning. The hill does not forgive. It does not forget. It hunts in your mind as much as in your body. The darkness will follow you. Emily clutched the journal. Every shadow in the attic grew longer, darker, alive. They could hear it moving below, hunting, remembering. Suddenly, the mirror cracked. The figure's face pressed against the glass, wide and grinning. The attic shook. Dust and debris rained down. Emily screamed, holding the journal like a shield. Outside, the storm raged. Rain lashed the windows, thunder shook the house. Inside, the hill pulsed like a heartbeat, syncing with Emily's own terror. The shadows weren't just in the attic, they were inside them now, whispering, clawing at their minds. Jacob gritted his teeth. "We have to go. Now." Emily nodded, though fear clawed at her throat. The only way out was through the darkness of the house and the darkness inside themselves. The storm outside had turned into a full-blown tempest. Rain slammed against the windows like thousands of fingernails, and the wind carried whispers that made the hairs on Emily's arms stand on end. Every shadow in the house seemed to quiver, waiting, hungry. Emily clutched her grandmother's journal tightly. Jacob's hands were raw from gripping hers, but they both knew there was no turning back. The hill had already claimed their fear, and it would not let them leave easily. The map in the journal led them to a hidden door behind a bookshelf in the attic. Emily pushed, and the shelf groaned as it revealed a narrow staircase leading downward, carved into the earth beneath the house. The smell hit them first. Damp soil, decay, and something worse, metallic, coppery, like blood. This must be it," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "The heart of the hill." Jacob swallowed hard. "I don't like it." But there was no choice. They descended. The stairs led into a cavernous chamber. The walls pulsed faintly, as if the stone itself were breathing. At the center, a pool of dark liquid reflected no light. Only the shadows of Emily and Jacob twisted, warped, wrong. From the darkness, a voice hissed, low and guttural. "You came. I remember you." The shadows coalesced, forming the figure they had glimpsed in the mirror, faceless, towering limbs stretching and twisting like smoke. Every heartbeat in the chamber made the figure grow, stretching, feeding on their terror. Emily raised the journal. The pages fluttered, almost alive, and one passage glowed faintly in the dim light. "Confront it. Name it. The hill remembers. But fear gives it strength. Fear binds you. Courage true, courage can weaken it." Jacob shook his head. "I don't know if I can." A hand shot from the pool, dragging Jacob down. Emily screamed, lunging forward. The shadows clung to her, whispering her deepest fears. You will fail. You are nothing. You are already ours. Emily's mind raced. She had to fight the fear. The hill thrived on it. She gritted her teeth and yelled, I am not yours. The figure recoiled, a wail of rage and anguish filling the chamber. The pool rippled violently. The walls of the cavern shivered. They stumbled backward, clutching each other, as more figures emerged from the shadows, twisted forms of people who had been trapped on Raven Hill for generations. Their eyes hollow, mouths frozen in silent screams. They reached for Emily and Jacob. Jacob grabbed a heavy stone from the cavern floor and swung it at a shadow. It dissipated into smoke and ash with a shriek. Keep moving, he shouted. Emily scanned the chamber. There, an archway of stone, covered in carvings of faces, hands, eyes. The journal mentioned it, a portal, a way out, but it required a sacrifice. She hesitated. We might not both make it, she whispered. Jacob grabbed her hand. We survive, together, whatever it takes. As they stepped toward the portal, the figure lunged, and the shadows converged, thick and suffocating. Emily screamed, slamming the journal onto the stone archway. Light exploded from the pages, burning away the shadows. Searing the air, the figure let out a deafening roar, retreating into the darkness of the pool. The chamber trembled violently, dust and debris raining down. Emily and Jacob held each other, tight, heartbeats echoing in unison. Finally, the light from the portal enveloped them, and the cavern seemed to collapse around them. They fell through the stone archway, landing hard on the damp earth outside the hill. The storm had passed, leaving only a cold, silent mist over Raven Hill. They were alive, but the hill, it watched, it waited. Emily whispered, shaking, It's not over. Jacob nodded. It never is. The fog clung to the town of Ashmore, curling around the streetlights like ghostly fingers. Emily and Jacob stumbled through the damp streets, hearts still pounding from their escape. The night was eerily silent, almost too silent, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Do you feel that? Emily whispered, glancing around. Jacob nodded, swallowing hard. It's like something's watching us. They had hoped the hill was behind them, but the shadows had followed. Every reflection, windows, puddles, even the chrome of parked cars revealed movements that weren't theirs, twisted shapes lurking just beyond their sight. By midnight, the town seemed empty. Houses loomed with darkened windows, doors slightly ajar, though no wind had touched them. The streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long, stretching shadows. Emily felt her chest tighten. Every nerve in her body screamed danger. Then she saw it. A figure, faceless, stood at the end of the street. It didn't move, but its presence made the air throb. The shadows of its form seemed to slither along the pavement, reaching toward them. Jacob, she whispered, gripping his arm. It's here. The figure glided closer, silent, unnerving. Emily remembered the journal. Fear strengthens it. Name it, and it weakens. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and said, barely above a whisper, You cannot touch us. You are nothing without fear. The figure froze. Its form shimmered, wavering, as though confused. But then it laughed, a sound like broken glass scraping across bone. You cannot escape. Ravenhill remembers, it hissed. Jacob looked around desperately. The streets twisted unnaturally, turning into alleys that led nowhere, staircases that ended in walls, and shadows that moved against the light. It was as if the town itself had been reshaped by the hill's will. Emily gripped the journal tightly. We need to find a place, a stronghold, somewhere it can't reach completely. They ran, slipping through back alleys, avoiding the dark, forms that reached from corners, their whispers promising torment. One shadow, more daring than the rest, lunged at Emily. She swung her bag, knocking it back. It hissed and vanished, only to appear again, closer, faster. Hours passed like minutes. Exhaustion clawed at them, but the shadows never stopped. And then, as dawn threatened the horizon, they stumbled into an abandoned church on the edge of town. Its doors creaked open, revealing pews coated in dust, and a sanctuary that smelled of decay and old incense. This might work, Jacob said, barricading the doors with broken furniture, at least until the sun fully rises. Emily shivered, scanning the stained glass windows. They depicted angels, but in the flickering morning light, their faces twisted into grimaces, as if mocking her. She realized with a sinking feeling, the hill's darkness had followed them, even here. Then she heard it, a whisper, low and insidious, curling through the wooden beams. "You cannot hide. You are mine." Jacob grabbed her arm. "We have to fight it. Together." Emily nodded, flipping through the journal. A passage glowed faintly. "The darkness can follow, but it can be bound. Courage must be shown, not whispered. Stand in the light, confront it fully, or it will consume all." As the first rays of sun cut through the foggy sky, the shadows recoiled, shrieking, but the air still hummed with menace. Emily and Jacob realized the battle wasn't over, it had only just begun. By the next evening, Ashmore was no longer the quiet town it once seemed. Windows shuttered themselves, doors banged open and closed, and the fog rolled in thicker than ever, swallowing the streets in a gray, suffocating blanket. Emily and Jacob stayed holed up in the abandoned church. The only safe place they could find, but safety was an illusion. The shadows had grown bolder. They crept through cracks in walls, slithered along ceilings, and whispered incessantly, in voices that sounded like everyone Emily had ever known, distorted, sinister, mocking her. "They're learning," Jacob said, voice tight with fear. "They're learning how we think." Emily nodded, flipping through the journal. One passage glimmered faintly under the flickering candlelight. "The darkness does not remain confined. When it senses fear unbound, it spreads. To fight it, you must face it, and not alone." By nightfall, the church trembled. Every shadow in Ashmore seemed to converge on them, pooling outside the windows like ink. Emily peeked through a crack and saw the streets twist unnaturally. Trees leaned sideways, as if pushed by invisible hands. Street lamps bent toward the ground, dripping black liquid that hissed when it hit the pavement. "It's not just following us anymore. It's invading," Emily whispered. Suddenly, a piercing scream tore through the fog. It was high-pitched, animalistic, yet unmistakably human. They recognized the voice. It was Mrs. Kellen, the old woman who lived at the edge of town. "We have to help her," Jacob said, but Emily grabbed his arm. "No," she said, eyes wide. "It's a trap. That's how it lures you out." The shadows pulsed against the church walls, pressing harder, whispering louder. A form coalesced in the doorway, tall, ragged, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce into their very souls. "You cannot stop me," it hissed, voice like 100 nails scratching across wood. "I am the hill. I am the darkness you carry." Emily's mind raced. The journal had mentioned courage must be shown, but courage alone might not be enough. They needed a plan. "Jacob, remember the names," Emily said, breath shaking. "We have to speak them, our fears, out loud. Name them. Control them." Jacob nodded and stepped forward, voice cracking. "Fear of losing everyone. Fear of the dark. Fear of being consumed." The shadow recoiled slightly, as if struck. Its form wavered, losing definition for a moment, but then surged forward again, faster and more furious than before. Emily screamed her own fears. "I am afraid of failing, afraid of leaving you alone, afraid of Raven Hill." For a fleeting moment, the room felt lighter. The shadow shrieked, a sound that made the floor vibrate, and then it split. Hundreds of tiny black forms swarmed, darting into every corner, seeping through cracks. Emily and Jacob realized with horror, naming their fears only delayed it. It didn't destroy it. The hill's power had spread into Ashmore, infecting every shadow, every whisper, every crack in the walls. And outside the church, the town itself seemed alive, hostile. Jacob whispered, voice trembling. We need help. People who understand this, or it's going to consume everyone. Emily nodded grimly, clutching the journal. We start with the library. The historical records might have answers. There's always history behind evil like this. As they prepared to leave, a shadow lunged from the floorboards, long arms clawing. They barely dodged, barricading the entrance behind them, leaving the church trembling and groaning, as if screaming in pain. The streets of Ashmore awaited them, silent, deadly, waiting for the hill to claim the living. The library loomed like a tomb, its arched windows shattered, doors barely hanging on their hinges. Ashmore's fog clung to it like a living thing, curling around their ankles as Emily and Jacob approached. This place, it feels wrong, Jacob muttered, voice trembling, like the walls are watching us. Emily swallowed hard. Everything feels wrong. That's why we need to go in. History holds the key. We need to know what Ravenhill is. Inside, the air was thick and musty. Dust swirled like tiny specters in the pale light filtering through broken windows. Shelves were upturned, books strewn across the floor, some open 2 pages covered in symbols that seemed to crawl as you looked at them. Then they heard it, a soft, deliberate scratching echoing through the stacks. Emily grabbed Jacob's hand. It's here. From the shadows emerged a figure, or what had once been human. Its skin was gray and mottled, eyes hollow but glowing faintly, mouth twisted in a permanent scream. It moved with unnatural jerks, as if its bones were breaking and reforming with every step. You, Emily whispered, voice cracking. You're someone from the town. The creature tilted its head, a low gurgle escaping. Then it lunged. Emily and Jacob barely dodged, diving behind a toppled shelf. Books crashed to the floor, dust choking the air, the smell of decay overwhelming. They ran deeper into the library, finding a spiral staircase leading down to the basement. A chill like liquid metal ran down Emily's spine. This has to be it, she said. The heart of the darkness. The basement was a cathedral of shadows. Stone walls were etched with symbols pulsing faintly in the gloom. At the center, a black mound rose from the floor. It wasn't just dirt. It was alive, twisting, writhing, reaching. 100 tendrils stretched outward, crawling along the walls, snaking through the floor, even into the stairwell. Ravenhill had come to Ashmore. From the shadows, whispers rose mocking, cruel, intimate. They spoke of fears, regrets, secrets. Every whispered word felt like knives slicing Emily's mind. Jacob grabbed her shoulder. We can't let it touch us. We have to destroy it somehow. Emily's eyes fell on the journal. A passage glimmered in the dim light. The darkness is born from fear, fed by doubt, and controlled only by the courage of the unwilling. To fight it, one must sacrifice. Yet not all sacrifices are what they seem. Before they could process, a tendril lashed out, snatching the journal from Emily's hands. She screamed, lunging, but the black mass pulled it into itself, sucking light from the room. The whispers surged into a deafening roar. Faces twisted, screaming, lost formed in the shadows, their mouths moving in silent agony. Among them, Emily saw Jacob's face for a split second before he was pulled toward the darkness, fingers clutching at hers, slipping through her grasp like smoke. No, Jacob, she cried, grabbing for him, but he vanished into the writhing. Blackmound. Emily was alone. A cold, sinister voice resonated through the basement. You cannot stop me. You belong here, as all do. The hill chooses. The hill remembers. The hill hunts. Emily's chest heaved. Fear clawed at her throat, but somewhere deep inside, a spark ignited. She remembered the names of her fears, the truths she had spoken. Courage wasn't enough. She had to act. Grabbing a fallen candelabra, Emily charged. She swung it into the mound. The black mass recoiled, shrieking in a sound that tore at her very soul. Shadows shrieked and writhed, but the mound began to crack. A single line of light appeared, splitting the darkness like a wound, and then silence. For a heartbeat, Emily dared to hope. Then a whisper drifted into her ear, soft, chilling, almost human. "This is only the beginning." She shivered. Ravenhill was not defeated. Not yet. And Ashmore's fate, Jacob's fate, hung in the balance. Emily staggered out of the basement, her lungs burning, her mind screaming. The library loomed behind her, like a graveyard monument, silent except for the faint, sinister whispers that clung to the fog. Jacob was gone. The town of Ashmore seemed unchanged. Everything was wrong. The streets were empty, unnaturally quiet. Doors hung open, their hinges screaming with the slightest breeze. Windows reflected faces that weren't theirs, twisted, hollow-eyed, screaming silently. Shadows stretched and moved with a life of their own. Emily realized with a chill that the hill had spread. The blackness wasn't confined to the library. It seeped through Ashmore, through the streets, through the very soil beneath her feet. Ravenhill was awake from the distance. She heard a faint tolling of the old church bell, though the church had been abandoned for decades. Each chime seemed to shake the ground, resonating in her bones. Then she saw them figures emerging from the fog. People she recognized, friends, neighbors, but their faces were blank, their eyes like dark wells. Slowly, they advanced. Emily ran, heart hammering. Her thoughts raced. How do I fight this? How do I save anyone? How do I save Jacob? She remembered the journal. She had to return to the heart of the darkness. Alone, trembling, she traced her steps back to the library. The spiral staircase groaned under her weight as she descended once more into the basement. The black mound waited, pulsating like a living heart. Jacob was there, or something that had been him. His eyes were wide, terrified, yet hollow. Tendrils wrapped around him, pulling him deeper into the mass. "Emily." His voice broke through the shadows, weak but real. Emily grabbed the journal, hands shaking. Her fingers traced the passage she had read before. The darkness is born from fear, fed by doubt, and controlled only by the courage of the unwilling. To fight it, one must sacrifice. Yet not all sacrifices are what they seem. Realization struck. Courage alone wasn't enough. Fear had to be faced. She had to confront her own deepest terror, her own doubt, grief, and guilt. She closed her eyes and stepped into the mound. Shadows enveloped her, writhing, whispering, clawing at her mind. Faces of everyone lost, including Jacob, swirled around her, screaming silently. She felt the darkness trying to consume her soul. "No," she screamed, not with fear, but with defiance. She faced the memories, the losses, the guilt she had carried her whole life. Each fear she named weakened the tendrils. Each truth she embraced burned a hole through the shadows. Jacob's hand found hers. "Emily, I'm here." Together, they shouted, their voices merging with the journal's forgotten incantation. Light exploded from the mound. Shadows hissed, shrieking, twisting, before collapsing inward, leaving only darkness at the edges. For a moment, silence. A fragile, trembling silence. Emily and Jacob emerged, alive, exhausted, and battered. The fog was thinning. The streets of Ashmore were empty, but no longer hostile. The library, the mound, the whispers gone. But as they turned to leave, Emily's eyes caught something at the top of Ravenhill. A single black tendril remained, slithering along the ground, pulsating faintly. The hill was quiet, but it remembered.